morning, everyone. I also love my job. I get to combine my passion of long distance running with my everyday work. So if I'm not studying runners, I'm out there running myself. One of the best things about running is that it doesn't matter whether you're elite or recreational. We all get to run on the same streets and trails. Take the hallowed turf of this great stadium. I'm guessing that there's not too many in here who can say that they've played a game of football or cricket against the world or even nation's best. But who in here has done that victory lap of the MCG when they've finished the Melbourne half or full marathon? Excellent. The great thing about running events is that, unlike any other sporting competition, whether you're elite or recreational, we all have to run the same course and competing against each other. It doesn't matter if you're going to finish that marathon in closer to 2 or nearer to 6 hours. We all have to run that same course. So, although today's talk is going to focus on my work with elite runners, I'm hoping that this is applicable to any of those athletes out there trying to seek their personal best. Now, endurance athletes, be it elite or weekend warriors, are a different bunch. I'm allowed to say that. Only a few weeks ago, you would have found me running 26 laps of the 10. We take crazy as a compliment. One of the things you may notice about endurance athletes is that they have a different personality. You'll notice that they are obsessive. They have this drive, this ambition, and perhaps a bit more of a focus on quantity over quality. Now, if you're a fan of pop psychology, then you've probably heard the term type A personality. Now, this was coined back in the 1950s when cardiologist Maya Friedman noticed a relationship between type A personalities and heart disease. Now, I'd like to suggest that these type A personalities are also at greater risk of a Strava injury. Anyone heard of a Strava injury? Well, today I'm going to tell you about how VU's biomechanical expertise is involved in a multidisciplinary approach to trying to identify risk factors for running injuries and how we can get our athletes back to peak performance. So, for those of you who don't know Strava, it's a website and mobile app that's used to track an athlete's activity via GPS. It's also known as the social network for athletes. So, using the GPS in your mobile phone or on a device such as these Garmin watches, it tracks time and position data and then uploads that to your feed. On this feed, your friends and followers, they may be just normal recreational runners or elites as well, they all get to view your activities. They get to write comments. They give you kudos, which is like a Facebook like, when they see something that they like. So it's also another way of stalking your friends and competitors. But just be careful if your bosses are on there too following you. They'll see those lunchtime rides and runs or those sick days. Strava does have its good side of things too. It allows us to track things like our heart rate, our running pace, our weekly mileage, and even the shoes that we wear. As the saying goes, if it's not on Strava, it didn't happen. However, this over-obsession on uploading our runs to Strava or these other online devices is becoming a risk factor for injury. And now I'm going to tell you why. So, like an elite athlete, we begin to develop an online identity. This identity gives us a baseline for what we consider is normal and what our followers consider is normal for us. And then this can create like an internal pressure where we feel that we're forced to lace up our shoes and get out the door, even if it's at the detriment to our body. Strava brings out the competitiveness in people. It's hard not to. There's leaderboards of how far you've run this week. There's how fast you run these segments. So this obsession with training for the sake of a kudos, where only metrics are based on how far or how fast you've run, is now becoming a serious risk factor for injuries. Now, an injury for any of us in the room is upsetting. None of us like to be stopped running or riding because of an injury. But that kind of thing has nothing upon the devastation of being put out of the Olympic Games just 3 weeks before the Games, like our poor athlete here. Unfortunately, foot fractures are far too common in our elite athletes. And due to the high reoccurrence rate, many of these athletes are told that they'll never run again. So my role as a biomechanist at the VIS and with Athletics Australia is to make sure that we can get these runners back training and ultimately competing again. We want to take them out of that moon boot and get them back running as soon as possible. So, to begin with, we almost have to have them literally running on the moon. These Alter-G anti-gravity treadmills were designed to alter the weight of a user. It uses a pressurised bag with technology that was built and designed by NASA to allow their astronauts to exercise and maintain their conditioning in space. We, on the other hand, use it the opposite way. This airbag inflates around the runner and allows them to maintain their normal running movements while offloading their body weight by up to 80%. So if you can imagine, every step that you normally take while running sends about 2 to 3 body weights of force through your foot and leg, which we can't do this to a runner with a stress fracture. So by looking at the biomechanics of the runner, I'm able to prescribe an adequate load that will gradually progress them back to full body weight again. If one of our athletic service team, be that the doctor, physio or coach, suspect that running technique may have something to do with an athlete's injury, then I perform a gait assessment on that athlete. So I look at their movement patterns. I look at how their foot strikes the ground and rolls over. I look at the stability of the pelvis and hips. And this can give me information about whether there may be muscular imbalances, altered technique or structural issues that may be contributing to this injury. Now, while these 2D videos, similar to that you may have seen in one of your local shoe shops or at the podiatrist, can give us good information, it doesn't comprehensively give us a full picture. At the Biomech Lab at VU, we have state-of-the-art 3-dimensional force sensing treadmills. These treadmills have a force plate built into the conveyor system that allows us to measure that impact of the foot strike at 1,000 times per second. When we combine that with our 3-dimensional cameras around our runner, we can get very detailed information about joint mobility, rotational alignment. We can see how much force is going through the foot at each foot strike and how that force is distributed through the rest of the body. We combine that information together and then look to see whether there may be, again, some movement asymmetries or perhaps some force imbalances. And then I'll work with the physios and the strength and conditioning coaches to come up with a suitable program to address those deficiencies. Now, while the lab environment gives us the most comprehensive analysis, being able to analyse or assess an athlete in their natural environment is really the long-term goal in trying to totally understand the nature of these injuries. Thankfully, we now have new technologies and new wearable sensors that are allowing us to accurately measure the biomechanics of our athletes outside of the laboratory. Now, we use these sensors produced by Dorsavi, which is just a local company here from Melbourne. And with these sensors, we place them on the shin of our runner, and it gives us accelerometer data at around 200 times per second. So we can have the athlete running at different paces and on different surfaces, and we get some really good information about the load, that is the forces going through the joint, contact time, so the time that the foot is in contact with the ground, and cadence, that is how many steps per minute that the athlete is running at. From this information, we can see if there is some asymmetries, and then again, working with the strength and conditioning coaches, we can come up with a detailed program. So addressing things like Achilles tendon weakness through eccentric exercises. We work on other lower limb exercises to try improve tendon condition and lower limb musculoskeletal stiffness. And by improving those, we can get the runner running more efficiently. Furthermore, I can then assess the athlete with just these little sensors while they're out on their runs to see whether they are adapting to our interventions. So once the athlete is pain-free, I can assess, make sure that we've got symmetry again, and then I can advise that they can go back to their regular running program again. We also have some really unique sensors that monitor the force and pressure within the shoe. So you may have seen that on the last slide. These are insoles that go into the shoe and just connect on, and then we get information about, very detailed information about positions of the foot that may be being overloaded and perhaps contributing to some of those stress fractures. Now, perhaps there's some people here in the room who have some other great ideas on how we might be able to include some of these monitoring systems into the athlete's daily training environment. Maybe there's some other better ways that we can track our athletes. Maybe you've got some other applications for these sensors. Perhaps you work in intelligent textiles that we might be able to incorporate into clothing or footwear. I'd love to have a chat to you. Or perhaps I've been able to give you some better ideas of how you can assess your injured athletes in your clinic. Now, my research at VU is focused on gaining a better understanding of how interventions, be that strength training or footwear, can manage or prevent some of these foot-related injuries. I want to be able to provide more detailed, specific evidence to be able to work with our medical staff, our coaches, to provide the best way to get our athletes back to peak performance so they can enjoy the rewards of their athletic achievements. So to summarise, assessing an athlete in their natural training environment is the ideal opportunity to assess these injuries. However, it does take a multidisciplinary approach to get our athlete performing at their best. But finally, a kudos is definitely not worth an injury. Thank you.